Football's golden oldies from the Toll House in Lancaster, Part 2. Semi-final. Portugal, in Gordon's mind, were the most complete side in the World Cup, and in Eusebio, the Black Panther, they had the star of the tournament. Everybody made telling contributions to a pulsating game of football, and Nobby style stuck to Eusebio like bark to a tree. After 31 minutes, a shot by Roger Hunt was blocked by goalkeeper Jose Pereira. The ball ran loose and Bobby Charlton stroked it across the lush turf into the net. In the second half, England's slender advantage looked shaky until Hurst crossed the ball across the edge of the penalty area and Bobby Charlton, racing in, hit one of his trademark thunderbolts to make it 2-0. After 82 minutes, Jack Charlton handled the ball and the penalty was given. Gordon knew nobody saved Eusebio penalty kicks, but he had done his own work and knew he hit them to the goalkeeper's right. But Alan Ball was pointing to Gordon's right, which alerted Eusebio, and Banks thought he was going to change his usual tactic. So he decided on a double bluff to dive to his left. The ball went to his right. The first goal Gordon had conceded in 443 minutes of World Cup football. He could have strangled Alan Ball. At the final whistle, the Portuguese players were devastated. But to a man sporting in defeat, Eusebio was inconsolable and wept unashamedly. Otto Gloria, the Portuguese coach, summed up the thoughts of many when he said, "Surely this was the final tonight." His classical game. This was another of Gordon's favourite photographs, although you can imagine the stick that he and Nobby Stiles took after beating Portugal in the semi-final of the World Cup in 1966. Banks always looked on this game as the greatest classic in which he had played. The match was won in midfield where Bobby Charlton was at his majestic best, and where the toothless tiger, Nobby Stiles, mastered the great Eusebio, the Portuguese danger man with a magnificent display of control and marking. Gordon said, "I remember Alf Ramsey leading all the players in a round of applause for Nobby in the dressing room after the match, and it was the only time I ever saw Nobby blush." Before the game, Alfred said, "Norbert, I want you to mark Eusebio," to which Nobby replied, "Permanently, boss," which brought a round of applause and laughter from his England teammates. The build-up to kick-off. Alfred ensured England weren't complacent, but the dressing room rituals took on extra significance that day. Gordon tied his laces at least 4 times. Nobby headed for the toilet for the umpteenth time. Jack Charlton stood in front of the mirror, applying Vaseline to his eyebrows. Ray Wilson found a jar of Vicks Vapor Rub in Les Cocker's kit bag and smeared some around his nostrils and on the front of his red shirt. Bobby Moore sat impassively, his socks round his ankles, as Harold Shepherdson rubbed copious amounts of liniment into his legs. Bobby Charlton and Jeff Hurst chatted while making last-minute adjustments to their boots. Nobby, back from the loo, sat with arms folded and legs outstretched. Martin Peters sipped tea from a thick white cup that belonged to a British rail buffet. George Cohen, ready and willing, was immersed in the special edition matchday programme. Roger Hunt sat like a zombie, Suddenly he sat up, clapped his hands together and sniffed, then resumed his previous catatonic demeanour. Nobby passed Gordon on the way to the loo again. Gordon was breathing deeply, trying to stay calm. As Alf said his piece, but his mind was roller coasting, then it was time to go. Somewhere in the distance he heard a band play. Flanked by Alan Ball and Roger Hunt, Gordon stood guardsman-like as the bands played the national anthems. Then England kicked off under gold leaf sunshine. The World Cup final. One of England's prime strength was the resolute backline, but after 13 minutes, Ray Wilson went up to meet the centre, but his header lacked power and distance. The ball fell to Helmut Haller, who from Gordon's left shot across the face of goal. Although his shot lacked power, Banks saw the ball late and it crept into the net. 5 minutes later, England caught the Germans napping. Moore took a quick free kick after checking to see where Jeff Hurst was, then floated the ball into the penalty area, where Hurst headed the equaliser. Alan Ball was the epitome of perpetual motion, buzzing up and down the right flank, causing Schnellinger all manner of problems. Then he took a corner. Jeff Hurst hammered it towards goal. Schultz lunged at the ball, which ballooned into the air, and as it dropped, Martin Peters stepped forward to rifle it into the net. 2-1 up. Jack Charlton was penalised for a foul on Ziggy Held. Lothar Emery drove the free kick into a sea of red and white shirts. Did Schnellinger handle the ball? Weber came sliding in to lift the ball with the toe of his boot. Ray Wilson tackled fresh air. Banks grasped at nothing, and the ball shot over both of them to nestle in the net. Extra time, Al said to his team, "You have won the World Cup once, now you must go out and win it again." With 10 minutes on the clock, Nobby Stiles put a long pass down the right wing. Ball chased it and hit a low ball to Jeff Hurst, who swiveled and hit a rising drive that hit the underside of the crossbar before bouncing almost vertically down and was headed away by Weber. Referee Herr Dinst went over to the Russian linesman before turning to point to the centre spot. 3-2. Was it a goal? The debate concerning the legitimacy of England's third goal continues to this day, but England were leading in the World Cup final, and with about a minute remaining, Bobby Moore chested the ball down, moved upfield with customary ease, spotted Hurst some 10 yards in the German half, and chipped an exquisite pass in his direction. Hurst took the ball on his chest, and suddenly his legs began to pump as he headed towards goal. Not the corner flag to kill time. Tilkowski came out to narrow the angle, but Hurst blasted the ball goalwards. The roof of the net ballooned, and what followed was unforgettable. Gordon Banks ran to the edge of his area. Bobby Charlton dropped to his knees. Nobby Stiles and George Cohen unashamedly hugging one another. Alan Ball ran 5 paces before doing a cartwheel across the emerald turf. Jack Charlton looked up to the heavens. Roger Hunt leapt into the air, and seconds later, at the final whistle, Bobby Charlton cried like an innocent man suddenly released from jail. Nobby danced his toothless jig. Bobby Moore eventually led the team up the 39 steps to the royal box before shaking the hand of Her Majesty the Queen and receiving the World Cup. Gordon Banks' dream of winning the World Cup had evaporated, and his whole being was engulfed with euphoria. It was all over, like the man said, that the memories would reside with Gordon forever. What it looked like. The boys of '66. No prima donnas, no cliques, no loners, a team in every sense of the word. Back row, left to right, Jerry Byrne, Harold Shepherdson, Jack Charlton, Gordon Banks, Roger Hunt, Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst, George Cohen, Bobby Charlton. Front row, Nobby Stiles, Alan Ball, Martin Peters, Ray Wilson. The General was responsible for England's success. Alf, later and deservedly Sir Alf Ramsey, was in a class of his own. Some managers are tactically aware, some excel at coaching, others are good at motivation and man management, but Alf was superb at everything. That's what made him so special. He was always fair to his players and scrupulously honest. He put his job on the line for Nobby Stiles after the game against France, when the powers that be said Stiles should be dropped. But Alf said, if Nobby goes, I follow him through the door, which ended the conversation abruptly. He was devoted to the team ethic, yet at pains to point out that no one was indispensable. He bore no grudges and had no favourites, but his unrivalled knowledge of the game and the opposition were complemented by superb tactical acumen, yet his instructions to his teams were always clear and simple. I have never understood why the FA didn't think fit to have an extra winner's medal struck and presented to him. Why no statue in his honour was erected outside Wembley? Because if it hadn't been for Alf Ramsey, England would never have won the World Cup. At the post-match banquet, the Secretary of the Football Association, Dennis Follows, introduced Alf as a great man. But when Alf rose to his feet, he was at pains to correct that statement. There are no great men, only men. Alf Ramsey may have been just a man, but he was one possessed of an extraordinary talent. Always known as a general, during his playing days at Tottenham, he started most of the moves from his position at right back, and it was Ipswich who erected a statue to the great man, and it stands in Portman Road. Leaving Leicester. Change was on Gordon's agenda when the 1966-67 season got underway. On a Tuesday morning in April, Matt Gillis called him over for a chat. Gordon, the directors and I have been talking. Not to put too fine a point on it, we think your best days are behind you, and you should move on. What an error. Gordon was speechless and drove home in a dream. But next day, he found out that the reserve goalkeeper, Peter Shilton, had issued an ultimatum to the board. Unless he played in the first team, he would leave the club. Banks was placed on the transfer list for £50,000, and a number of clubs showed an interest. West Brom, Manchester United, Liverpool and West Ham. But none of them followed up the interest, apart from West Ham, who were talking terms with Gordon when suddenly Bobby Ferguson, the Kilmarnock keeper, was put up for sale, and Ron Greenwood turned to him instead of Banks. In April 1967, Stoke City came in for him, and as Gordon hadn't asked for a transfer, he thought he was entitled to a loyalty bonus for staying and will play in the reserves. Gordon met Tony Waddington in the main foyer and told him the story. Tony's face betrayed no emotion when he marched into Matt's office without knocking. 5 minutes later, he marched out. $2 grand all right? Banks nodded, and Tony said, good, then let's do the deal and get out of here. It wasn't Leicester who paid the 2,000, but Stoke City, who embarrassed Leicester, who could not afford to pay Banks a 2,000 loyalty bonus out of the £50,000 they got for him. World Cup on the horizon. Between 1968 and 1970, Tony Waddington slowly but surely turned Stoke City from a middling First Division side into one capable of challenging for silverware. He had taken over as manager in 1960 when Stoke were poorly placed in the Second Division and pulling in crowds of 9,000. His success came by blending youth and experience, a strategy he adhered to throughout his 17-year spell as manager. But the turning point for Stoke City came in 1970-71, and it followed another important stage in the career of Gordon Banks. For that summer, he played in another World Cup for England to pit his wits against the man he thought was the greatest in the world, Pelé. England's pre-tournament schedule began with a game against Colombia in Bogota, in stifling heat, but in front of 28,000 fans, England won 4-0 with goals from Peters 2, Charlton and Ball. 3 days later, in Quito, they played Ecuador at almost 10,000 feet above sea level, coming away with a 2-0 win with goals from Lee and Kidd. Gordon was on top form as Alf pushed the players hard in training, and after one of Alf's shot-stopping sessions, Bobby Charlton turned to Gordon and said, "Gordon, I've run out of ways to beat you." After the session, Banks discovered that he had lost 7 pounds during that day alone, and by the end of the fortnight, he weighed 12.5 stone, the lightest he had been since he was 17. A disgusting attempt to sabotage England's chances. During their stay at the El Tecadama Hotel, a curious incident took place when Bobby Moore visited the Greenfire jewellery shop in the hotel lobby to buy a present for his wife Tina. After leaving the shop, the manageress accused Moore of stealing a $600 bracelet. The Colombian police were called and Moore and Charlton signed a formal statement closing the matter. As the players were watching a film in the hotel's TV lounge, 2 suited Colombians came in and left with Bobby Moore. The players didn't think anything was amiss as they left for the airport to fly to Mexico. But the flight was chaotic as they ran into an electrical storm near Panama City. 15 minutes later, the storm seemed as nothing compared to the earthquake Alf Ramsey triggered as he stood to address the players and the accompanying press, saying Bobby Moore has been arrested in Bogota, accused of stealing a bracelet, with Bobby Charlton as his alleged accomplice. Alf might have just as well have said that Mother Teresa had been arrested for child abuse. It was that outlandish and unbelievable. When the team arrived in Mexico City, an army of TV, radio and press journalists ambushed the team, and the headline in the Mexican newspaper Esto was, "England arrived, a team of thieves and drunks." Liars and cheats face the unflappable England captain. Bobby Moore was unflappable, taking everything in his stride, and the cowardly Colombians found no chink in his armour and eventually dropped the ridiculous charges against him. seen Moore slip a $3,000 bracelet into his blazer pocket. Remember, the price was $600 originally. That is South American inflation for you. Another customer in the shop, Alvaro Suarez, added his own version of events by saying he saw Moore put a $6,000 bracelet studded with diamonds and emeralds into a pocket somewhere on his person. But now the liars were changing their stories when the police discovered the Green Street shop, Rojas, Padilla and Suarez were all in financial difficulties. When Bobby Moore appeared in court, the judge, Pedro Dorado, immediately threw the case out, and Moore, mightily relieved, said, "Charges were brought against me. The police simply acted on them and did their job establishing the truth, and they achieved this. I was totally innocent of the allegations against me, and that has been established, so all I want to do now is to join up with my fellow England players in Mexico and give my undivided attention to helping England retain the World Cup. Thank you, gentlemen." Start of the World Cup. England were in a tough group with Romania, Czechoslovakia and Brazil, who were on an unbeaten run over 2 years, winning all 6 of their qualification matches, while scoring 23 goals and conceding just 2. First game was against Romania in Guadalajara, and England failed to sparkle against a defensive team, but from a superb pass by Francis Lee, Jeff Hurst scored through the goalkeeper's legs. The day before the Brazil game, Alf made Gordon tremble at the knees when he said, "Gordon, a word please. A gentleman is on the telephone for you. It's a call I think you should take." A year earlier, almost to the day, Alf had beckoned Gordon in similar fashion before a game against Mexico to tell him his father had just died and that he should immediately return to England for his funeral, which Gordon did. Gordon picked up the phone and a plummy voice said, "Mr. Banks, I have the considerable pleasure and duty to inform you that you have been provisionally proposed to receive the Order of the British Empire in the forthcoming honours list, and to determine if you are in a position to accept it personally at Buckingham Palace, the occasion will be most auspicious." For a split second, Gordon thought it was a wind-up, the sort of thing Al Gore, Nobby Styles or Alan Mulligan might do, but then he had been summoned by Alf, and the trio would never involve Alf in one of their pranks, and anyway, they would never come up with a word like auspicious. Pelly and Banks. A crowd of over 72,000 packed the Guadalajara Stadium. The heat was intense. Players were sweating buckets before the game, and the tremendous spirit and mutual respect prevailed throughout the game. England knew they could match Brazil in possession, and their passing was just as good. Suddenly the game exploded into life as Jairzinho took off like a rocket, catching England on the hop as he raced towards Terry Cooper and went past him with a superb dummy. Banks glanced round his penalty area. What he saw spelled trouble. Tostao free at the near post. Muller trying in vain to close down Pelly. Jairzinho's textbook centre and Pelly's perfect header. 99 times out of 100, Pelly's shout of "Golo" would have been justified. But on that day, Banks was equal to the task. An occasion when years of hard work and practice combined in one perfect moment. As Pelly positioned himself for the resulting corner, he turned to Gordon and smiled before saying, Great save, mate. That one moment began a friendship for life. It was a fantastic game of football, even allowing for the Brazilians to emerge 7 minutes late for the second half, as Banks reached for the ice pack, only to find a bag of tepid water. Pelé shouted goal. I hit my toes as soon as I saw Jairzinho tearing down our left flank. Bobby Moore had left Tostão free at the near post. Brian LeBon was just outside our 6-yard box, and Alan Lowry was sprinting back, anxiety creasing his face at the sight of Pelé heading towards our penalty box, unmarked. I knew the cross was coming, moved 2 feet off my line, believing that since Pelé had entered the penalty area, I'd be first to the ball. Only Jairzinho didn't aim for the penalty spot. He whipped the ball across to a point just outside my 6-yard box, a yard in from my right-hand post. As I turned my head, I saw Pelé again. Such was the athleticism of the man, he'd already launched himself into the air. As I moved to my right, I was 3 paces off the centre of my goal when Pelé met the ball with the meat of his head. It was textbook stuff. Rose above the ball, heading it hard and low towards the right-hand corner, and I heard him shout, "Goal!" I suddenly found myself at a 40% angle, right hand stretching towards the post, knowing if I made contact, I had to get it up in the air and over the bar. So I rolled my hand slightly, using the 3rd and 4th fingers to get leverage. Pelé, ever the great sportsman, came up to Gordon smiling and patted him on the back, saying, "I thought that was a goal." That save brought about a great friendship. The TV footage of that game shows Gordon Banks laughing as he turned to take up his position for the corner. Bobby Moore had said to him, "You're getting old, Banksy. You used to hold on to them." The photograph shows 2 great players who epitomise what the game should be about. Pelé holding a Stoke City shirt when visiting a dear friend and remembering the moment they shared so many years ago. Coup de grace. Bobby Moore came across to challenge Tostão, leaving a gap in the centre of defence, which Alan Lowry filled. Brian LeBon was marking Pelé on his own as Martin Peters arrived to provide backup to the ball. But as he did so, Pelé jinked one way then the other and found the space to roll the ball into the path of Jairzinho. Terry Cooper was onto Jairzinho in a flash, but lost his footing on the lush turf. Jairzinho sidestepped to his right and Gordon Banks came quickly off his line to narrow the angle. Gordon was just beyond the left-hand angle of his 6-yard box when Jairzinho stubbed the toe of his boot at the base of the ball, which lifted the ball over Gordon's spread-eagle body and into the opposite corner of the net. Towards the end of the match, Jeff Astle found goalkeeper Felix the team to have a beer with the evening meal. Within 30 minutes, Banks felt very ill, so the team doctor, Neil Phillips, diagnosed a simple stomach upset. Gordon spent most of the night on the loo. Saturday morning, he still felt rough, though well enough to make the 150-mile trip to Lyon. Neil Phillips gave him some anti-nausea pills, saying he would feel better in 30 minutes, but Gordon didn't, and on arriving in Lyon, he went straight to bed, then straight to the loo, where he spent the night. Sunday morning, he felt a bit better, so Alf and Shepherdson gave him a fitness test, and Gordon knew that Alf's tests were very rigorous workouts. Gordon, jog over to that tree and back. Banks did it twice before standing 8 feet away as Shepherdson rolled the ball to him 3 or 4 times. How do you feel, Gordon? Asked Alf. Fine, replied Banks, still waiting for the fitness test to begin. Splendid. You're playing, said Alf. Banks couldn't believe it. Banks hoped that Alf knew what he was doing before going to lie down, but almost immediately the sickness gripped him again. The stomach cramps returned with a vengeance as he attended the team meeting in Alf's bedroom with sweat running down his face, where Alf required, well, not well, Gordon replied, and as Stepney and Styles helped him to his feet, he heard Alf tell Bonetti was playing. Heights to the depths. If England's game against Brazil had been one of the best games of the 1970 World Cup, the game against Czechoslovakia must have been one of the worst, as England sporting a new all-light blue strip won 1-0 with a penalty by Alan Clark, one of 5 changes to the team. The Jules Rimet Trophy finally slipped from England's grasp after this epic game ended in the most dramatic fashion. Things began to go wrong before the match when Gordon Banks went down with a stomach bug and was replaced by Peter Bonetti. After 30 minutes, England scored through Alan Murray and appeared to be in control as they extended their lead at the start of the second half, when Keith Newton crossed for Martin Peters to ghost in at the far post to add the finishing touch. Ramsey substituted Charlton and Peters for Colin Bell and Norman Hunter, and after 70 minutes Beckenbauer hit a low cross shot that deceived Bonetti to nestle in the net, and after 82 minutes Sealer jumped for a cross and backheaded the ball, which looped over a badly positioned Bonetti. The first half of extra time was fairly innocuous, but 5 minutes after the change of ends, Grabowski made a deep cross that beat Newton and was nodded back into the middle where, with Bonetti chasing shadows, Muller volleyed the ball home from 3 yards out. Dream over. Message in a bottle that spelled disaster. With England leading 2-0, Gordon got out of bed and turned the TV off. To this day, that's how he remembered the game. England are forever 2-0 up. He never watched the game in its entirety. He was never able to bring himself to watch it. It was only when Bobby Charlton came into his room that he froze. Tears were streaming down his face. privilege to have you in my charge. Alf Ramsey, England's greatest ever manager, then shook every one of his team by the hand and thanked them all before slipping quietly away. In 1970-71, Stoke City were competing for honours. In September, Stoke played Arsenal at the Victoria Ground, and the visitors had a habit of winning games 1-0, earning both their boring Arsenal and lucky Arsenal tags at this time. John Ritchie too, and goalies from Terry Conroy, Jimmy Greenough and Alan Lowe gave Stoke a convincing 5-0 victory to send the statisticians checking their records to find the last time anyone had gone knack against them. When Stoke City visited other grounds, Gordon Banks was given a terrific reception, and Bobby Moore and Bobby Charlton also received similar treatment for their England performances. Stoke were knocked out of the FA Cup in a replayed semi-final 2-0 by Arsenal at Villa Park, and the following season they went out of the FA Cup to Arsenal again, but consolation for the Potters came in the form of the League Cup, taking 12 matches to win it, a League Cup record. The semi-final against West Ham remains the longest tie ever. The first game took place on December 8th, and the tie was concluded on January 26th, setting up a Wembley final against Chelsea, where a goal from George Easton won it 2-1 for Stoke. George Easton, at 35 years and 161 days, became the oldest recipient of a League Cup winners' medal. Last game in English football. On October 21st, 1972, Stoke City travelled to Anfield, where they lost 2-1. Just another game, Gordon thought. In fact, it was to be his last in English football. The following day, he went to the Victoria Ground for treatment on a minor injury sustained against Liverpool. Driving home, he came up behind a slow car. The road was flanked by trees and dipped before taking a sharp turn to the right, so it wasn't the ideal place to overtake, but he was keen to get home to Ursula and her Sunday dinner. Gordon pulled out to pass and suddenly found himself on a collision course with an oncoming vehicle. He slammed his foot on the brake as a trickle of adrenaline rushed across his forehead. There was an almighty bang, the sound of glass shattering, then there was nothing. Gordon never liked the smell of hospitals. That stuffy, clinical fog was the first thing he sensed when he awoke from a deep, drug-induced sleep. Tried to open his eyes, but nothing happened. It was as if someone had glued down his eyelids. Banks brought out in a cold sweat and started to panic when a cool, clean, gentle hand held his hand. With the hand easing forward before guiding him back to the tower of crisp pillows. The nurse gave him a welcome cup of tea before telling him he had been in the operating theatre, where he had surgery on his eyes. How bad is it? Gordon asked. The nurse said, "You can't see out of your left eye because it is so swollen, but that should clear up in a day or two." "And my other eye?" asked Gordon. "The surgeon will explain when he comes to see you. You've had a very delicate operation." It seemed an eternity before the surgeon eventually arrived to tell him. The operation went well, Gordon. It lasted 3 hours because I had to do a lot of repair work. Fragments of the windscreen perforated your right eye, and I'm afraid there has been damage to the retina. "Am I going to lose it?" asked Gordon. The surgeon said, It will be a couple of weeks before I know for sure. With damage like this, there can be all manner of complications. But am I going to lose my eye? Repeated Banks. I'm afraid I couldn't put the chances at better than evens, replied the surgeon. 3 days later, the swelling on his left eye had gone down enough for Gordon to see, but it was not a pretty sight when he asked for a mirror and when the nurse arrived to change his dressing. The full extent of his injuries were revealed in gory detail. The gory details. Gordon had more than 200 stitches running from his face to his scalp, but he discovered later that the surgeon had also inserted over 100 micro stitches inside the socket of Gordon's right eye and around the periphery of the retina. Gordon said, I had no idea what the surgeon earned, but in my book it could never be enough. Nor can I praise highly enough my surgeon, all the doctors, nurses and other members of the North Staffordshire Hospital who gave me such tender care. Even today, the kindness and love I felt from everyone brings a lump to my throat. At first he thought he could carry on as before. Then he reached over for a cup of tea on the bedside table. It was shocked to grasp thin air. Photographers were camped outside his home until Tony Waddington pleaded with them to leave Ursula and the kids alone, and he would give regular bulletins. But Gordon was going to fight and come to terms with his disability, not wallow in a trough of self-pity. End of it all in Gordon's words. I shudder when I look at this picture of the wreck I was dragged from that Sunday lunchtime in October 1972, as I lost the sight of an eye. But the miracle is that I escaped with my life. The sequel to the crash was that I had to appear in court charged with dangerous driving, where I was found guilty and fined £250. But the magistrate said in view of my previous clean driving record, he would not take my licence away. He thought I had suffered enough. When I look at this picture, I just thank God that I'm still alive. A new life in Florida. God received thousands of letters from well-wishers, and Tony Waddington allowed him a 6-month period of adjustment before he asked the $64 million question, can you play on? God replied, Tony, you've been a great boss, and I think you know as well as I do. I could still do a job, but not the job I used to do. I'm going to have to call it a day. In the summer of 1973, his career as a Football League goalkeeper was over, and he began to coach the Stoke City youth team, and he was happy coaching. But in 1976, he got a call from the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, offering him a playing position in the North American Soccer League. So, in April 1977, he went to play as a named superstar in the North American Soccer League for Fort Lauderdale Strikers. The Strikers won their division in 1977, with Gordon Banks being named NASL Goalkeeper of the Year after he conceded only 29 goals in 26 games, the best defensive record in the NASL. He also played one League of Ireland game for St Patrick's Athletic, keeping a clean sheet in a 1-0 win over Shamrock Rovers at Richmond Park Stoke in 1977, after 17 years as manager. At Port Vale, manager Dennis Butler offered Gordon a coaching role at Vale Park. Dennis soon resigned, with Alan Blower, the former Stoke City player, taking over, and when Alan resigned soon after, Gordon went with him, and although he enjoyed coaching, he wanted to be a manager, so he applied for the Lincoln City and Rotherham United jobs. He didn't get either of those jobs, but was approached by the chairman of Telford United, who played in the Alliance Premier League, and with around 10 games to go, the chairman tasked Gordon with saving the club from relegation. Gordon accepted the challenge. He went to watch Bangor City in action and was impressed by their goalkeeper and centre half. So he talked to the Bangor chairman, Mr. Roberts, asking him how much he wanted for the pair. £1,500 was the answer, but he would have to take the centre forward as well, as the chairman said they were a job lot. Although Gordon wasn't keen on the centre forward, he snapped up the three of them. The goalkeeper and centre half did a great job for Telford. So too did the centre forward, scoring a hatful of goals, and by the end of the season, Telford were well clear of the relegation zone. From hero to zero. The following year, Gordon had to take a sabbatical in November to undergo an operation, and asked Jackie Mewley to take temporary charge of the team. And when Gordon returned in December, the chairman sacked him, but couldn't afford to pay him what they owed. The chairman, a few days later, offered Gordon another job as a raffle ticket seller in a concession booth at a local supermarket, which Gordon, out of sheer bloody-mindedness, accepted the offer. Many supporters said, a member of the England team that won the World Cup, the greatest goalkeeper there has ever been, selling draw tickets from this hovel. It's a bloody disgrace. And the groundswell of dissent grew. Eventually, public opinion in Telford swayed matters to Gordon. After 6 weeks, the chairman called Gordon into his office and pushed a cheque across the desk. It was about 50% of what they owed. But Gordon felt he had made his point and picked up the cheque, walked out of the office and out of football management. Football, even in these days where clubs at the top in millions of pounds, many clubs in the lower leagues will still have chairmen like the one at Telford United, basking in the glow of publicity as chairman, but with no scruples or standards. A ban for Banksy. With a short and not so sweet career in football management behind him, Gordon turned to the world of business. A Leicester motor dealer had plans to start up a corporate hospitality company and asked Gordon to run it for him. Gordon accepted and fronted the company for 10 enjoyable years. As everyone knows, tickets for an FA Cup final are like gold dust. So when Gordon was offered a bunch of tickets for the 1987 final by a tout, he snapped them up. A few weeks later, after the match, he was up before the FA, being asked to explain how tickets allocated to players from a leading club had found their way into the hands of Gordon's clients. All Gordon could do was plead guilty and await his punishment, which duly arrived. He was banned from receiving FA Cup final tickets for 7 years. The parent company of Gordon Banks Corporate Hospitality, which had been in poor shape anyway, went down the pan shortly afterwards, taking a lot of his savings with him. He had invested in the finance arm of the motor dealership and lost the lot. To his eternal credit, Leicester City offered him a testimonial to help him out. It was only wonderful gesture by the club and one that touched Gordon greatly. Lord Bath travelled unconventionally to the railway station. Gordon had been on the Pools panel for 15 years, which now comprised Roger Hunt, Tony Green, Gordon Banks, former referee Arthur Ellis, and ex-Scotland goalkeeper Ronnie Simpson. They used to meet at the Waldorf Hotel, where the food was first rate, although none of the panel was as impressed as Arthur Ellis, who used to bring a large bag which was filled to the brim with anything that was uneaten, earning the title A Walking Foreman and Mason by Roger Hunt. For a time, the chairman of the panel was Lord Bath, who took his responsibilities as seriously as the rest of the panel, and they all became great friends. And when Arthur's wife died, Lord Bath and the rest attended the funeral in Yorkshire. After the service, Arthur laid on a buffet at his home. Lord Bath, who had travelled by train, asked Arthur if he could call a taxi to take him to the station. Arthur said, "I'm not having you travel in a taxi, my lord. I'll sort out the transport for you." Lord Bath thanked Arthur for his kindness. 10 minutes later, Arthur was back. "Your transport is here, my lord," before leading him outside to the corpse hearse idling at the curbside. "It's all paid for. The driver has to pass the station, so we might as well drop you off on the way," said Arthur to the speechless lord. Some words from Banksy. "I have been involved in football as a player, coach, manager, raffle ticket seller and supporter for over 50 years. I have seen a lot of changes. The game has altered, but in essence it remains the same. Danny Blanchflower once said that football is about the pursuit of glory. That is certainly true, but it is also about human endeavour, about passion, courage and emotion. Sometimes it is about pride, honour and sometimes even humour. When played at its best and in the spirit of true sportsmanship, a football match becomes much more than a mere sporting contest. The truly beautiful game is a miracle of man's physical and mental capabilities, and when that happens, the pitch on which it is played becomes a nirvana. Words could never express my true gratitude to the players, managers, officials and supporters. Some people think there is no place for sentiment in football. There is now. Extra time. Jimmy Greaves said, "With Gordon, I used to ask myself, how can I beat this man?" Pele, for me, Gordon Banks, was the leading goalkeeper of the 1970 World Cup. Peter Shilton said, "Gordon Banks is the best in the world." I thought that was a goal. That was the words of Pele. "You and me both," Gordon Banks replied. "You're getting old, Banksy. You used to hold on to them." That was Bobby Moore. In 2008, Pele unveiled a statue of Banks outside Stoke City's new Britannia Stadium, showing him making his famous 1970 World Cup save. Banks won the FIFA Goalkeeper of the Year award 6 times, from 1966 to 1971 inclusive, and was named in the FIFA 100 list of the greatest players of all time, representing his country at 2 World Cups. The goalkeeper Gordon modelled himself on. Everyone in football learns from another football player, manager or coach. Gordon Banks modelled his game on the great Bert Williams of Wolverhampton Wanderers and England, and he could not not have found a better example of the art of goalkeeper than Bert, who in turn learned his craft from the great Harry Hibbs at Walsall. Banks made 679 appearances during a 20-year career, winning 73 caps for his country. Gordon Banks died on February 12, 2019.